Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and today I'm really delighted to have as my guest Marc Ramirez. Marc is the founder, along with his wife, of a nonprofit called Chickpea and Bean, which is really does a lot of beautiful, incredible outreach, helping people transition and embrace a plant-exclusive lifestyle and really take charge of their health. So, Marc, welcome. It's so nice to have you here. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Hey, Dr. Sabatino, thank you. It's always an honor to come and try and share this wealth of knowledge with so many, so appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, your story is so amazing when I look at it because it's a classic example of how, we can get really bogged down by the devastation that happens within our families and feel that there's nothing we could really kind of do about that. So I know that, you've had a long history in your family with all kinds of diabetic changes and transplant, devastating stuff. So I would love for you to go back, give us a little bit of that story and show how, and talk about how you were able to break free from that kind of genetic pool that was just really pointing you in a devastating direction.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you again. So when you look at my family, Frank, I grew up in Southern Texas, a big Mexican family, 8 brothers and sisters. And when I reflect back, ever since I have memories of my mother, she was popping pills for diabetes. She died, at a very young age, but all my earliest memories of my mother, there was always medications involved. And as the decades went on, it was just more and more medications and more problems with her health, right? And so it ended up that all of my brothers and sisters, with the exception of one sister, all of them ended up, and some of them, many to this day, are still struggling with diabetes. So I grew up, I'd go to the doctor. I ended up earning a football scholarship to play at the University of Michigan, the greatest university on this planet. Go Blue. But basically, Frank, I was a big guy. I've been a big person most of my life. I'm 6'2". When I was playing football at Michigan, I was 305 pounds. But I have a twin brother. There's 8 of us, 8 brothers and sisters in my family. And at the end of the day, Frank, slowly but surely, I started to see all my siblings, just like my mother had, just like my grandparents were struggling with diabetes, start to develop diabetes. Now, I was towards the latter part of the individuals who ended up battling with diabetes, and maybe it was because I did a lot of exercise throughout my earlier years. But at the end of the day, it got me too, right? So the same year that my mother passed in 2002, now this is after 33 years of fighting diabetes. My mother died at the young age of 61. She had 2 heart attacks. She had a kidney transplant. She ended up going blind for over a decade. You talk about another decade of dialysis and the horrible process that puts people through. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm really glad that we have that technology to help people, on kidney transplants, etc. But that whole process is pretty devastating to not only, my mother, but all those around us that love her and watch her suffer so much through that whole process. So at the end of the day, she dies at the young age of 61, 33 years of diabetes. And it wasn't high. It wasn't the high blood glucose or the low blood glucose. She needed a double bypass. All those foods that we were eating over all those decades ended up, causing some blockages in 2 of her coronary arteries. So they needed to go do a double bypass. She goes into Rush Presbyterian Hospital in Chicago at 61 years of age and does not come out. And so you look at her life and her struggles, those last 10, 15 years, horrific health, from a chronic disease standpoint, right? You're talking diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, multiple medications, laser surgeries to stop her eyes from bleeding. I don't know how many times she did that, but she was constantly going to get that done. Dialysis, she'd get peritoneal, then there'd be some infection, so now she'd go hemodialysis. I mean, you just talk about all of the devastation that comes with what is diabetes and really chronic disease, right? So I remember when my mother, when my wife and I met at Michigan, we got married, we started our family, and we live here in Michigan today. But we took our firstborn, right? We were so excited to take our firstborn to go meet my mother in Chicago, but my mom was already blind. She didn't get to see my children. She could hear them, right? She could see a silhouette, but she couldn't see the lines on their face. She couldn't see the color of their eyes. And so when we look at my little brother, Martin, right now, Martin was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 13 or 14, Dr. Sabatino. So he's 51 now. He's at 36, 37 years, right? And when you look at the devastation that diabetes has caused to his body, we're talking about over a decade of dialysis. He lost his right leg due to an amputation. He had a heart attack when he was going through one of his dialysis procedures, and literally he flatlined. He's had a pancreas and 2 kidney transplants, been blind since 2004. Half of his thyroid has been removed. I mean, just you look at all the devastation that is diabetes and long-term chronic illness and disease, and it's really been devastating for him. You know, of course, his wife, you know, this is the one thing where a lot of people, you know, they think, hey, well, it's just happening to me. It's not a big deal. And I used to think this way. I'm a man. Don't tell me what to eat. I'm a macho man.
But as you were looking at this stuff, I got to believe that it had to freak you out, even on an emotional level. I mean, watching your siblings, your parents, your watching this family history just kind of disintegrate in front of your eyes. Somehow that had to affect your psyche in some way. You were a 300-pound guy. I'm assuming you were an interior lineman for Michigan, right? Is that where you played? Right.
I was a right guard, yeah.
So as you went into college, did you manifest any of that diabetic change at all? Or did you kind of escape that? Because your brothers showed everything very young. How about you?
No, it wasn't until 2002. So I graduated from Michigan back in 1990. So it was about 12 years out of college.
I see. Okay.
It came and I was diagnosed with diabetes at that point. But you're right. Looking at my mom, needles, shots, insulin, and all these pills, and blood pressure and cholesterol, and then I'm seeing my other family members also starting to, deal with these same issues. And the whole thing, Dr. Sabatino, is it's in your genes. Hey, you're Hispanic. Hispanics have high rates of diabetes. It's in your genetics and your genetic makeup. There's not much you can do about this. So really, there was no hope being given to us.
Right.
Professionals like, hey, you just got to brace for impact, man. This thing is going to come and hit you like a truck, right? Now, who knows when? But all of my brothers and sisters at varying points start dealing with this to the point where everybody, with the exception of one sister, is the only one who has not battled diabetes. Now, here's the ironic thing of that. She didn't battle diabetes. So guess what? My mother, I think I mentioned before, she had a kidney transplant. Guess where that kidney came from? My sister, who hasn't battled with diabetes. So no diabetes for my older sister, Jill, but yet she donated one of her kidneys to help my mother. It did extend her life another 5 years or so. But at the end of the day, now she's also impacted by this, what is diabetes and chronic disease. So it's just devastating. My twin brother, he's been diabetic approximately 25 years, blood pressure, cholesterol issues. My little sister, probably 22-ish years or so, blood pressure, cholesterol issues. I mean, everybody's struggling with this. And while some of them are making some changes and tweaks, because my wife and I, Kim and I, have been doing this we're going on since 2011. December of 2011 was when we adopted this low-fat, whole-food, plant-based lifestyle.
Yeah, but in those 12 years that you made the point between college and when you started manifesting your own blood sugar issues, it was at that point you then were put on an onslaught of medication, and you were dealing with, high hemoglobin A1C and all of those things. I saw your story. So I guess at that point, you just thought that was something you had to do. I mean, there was no way around it. I had to treat myself with these drugs because there was no other way out.
That's exactly right. We were getting no hope or inspiration from anybody around us, right? It was all just, hey, your family history, you're diabetics and you're Hispanics and it's in your genes and there's not much you can do. So here, let's start this metformin, right? And then gradually over a whole decade, I'm on Lantus insulin shots. I'm on 2 diabetes medications. I have psoriasis on my scalp. I'm obese. I don't sleep very well. You name it. And I heartburn all the time, right? I'm popping Pepsid AC and Zantac and all this like candy, because I keep getting heartburn all the time. And it was just it was a terrible way to live. We go on vacation. Hey, how do I keep that insulin cold? We got
Right.
in the ice. It was just, we were shackled to these medications and to this lifestyle. And this is why when people ask me, well, hey, Marc, don't you feel, limited in what you can eat and limit? Like, no, I feel all this freedom, and I feel all the abundance of food that is out there in the plant-based world. I don't miss anything that I used to eat that I later found out was actually killing me. I mean, it was.
Well, as we get into that, let's just take a short break because we want to hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association. I'm here with Marc Ramirez. We're going to be right back. You're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. Dr. Frank Sabatino here, encouraging you to check out the NHA membership. For just $35 a year in the U.S. and $55 internationally, you'll have access to a wealth of resources, including our quarterly full-color print magazine, Health Science. Stay updated on the latest health tools, inspiring stories, and exclusive events like the NHA Conference and plant-exclusive cruises. Join us at healthscience.org/membership and make a difference in your life and the world. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host, and now back to the NHA Health Science Podcast, where more exciting insights await you. Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. I'm here with Marc Ramirez from Chickpea and Bean, and we're really talking about his evolution from major family devastation with diabetes and so on into his consciousness of plant-based eating. So what was the kind of the divine intervention that led you to Forks Over Knives? I saw that was like a big transition when you discovered that. How did that come to be?
So earlier that summer, my wife and I adopted this plant-based lifestyle in December of 2011. And in July of 2011, my brother had just had his right leg amputated after all the years of struggling with diabetes. Now he's been blind and all the issues that I mentioned before, right? So I'm looking at my life. I'm looking at my wife, my 2 children. I'm looking at the fact that my mother never was able to see my children. I'm thinking about my grandkids. I'm thinking about the future. And I'm thinking, I'm 6'2", 260 pounds at the time before we started this lifestyle. My wife is 5'4", about 120 pounds. Oops. I'm not supposed to. You just got me.
You never give away your lady's weight. You know that, right? Okay.
but at the end of the day, Dr. Sabatino, I'm looking like, how is this petite female going to help me? I'm a pretty big guy, right? How's she going to pull me or help me get into bed or whatever's needed, right? So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at my brother's amputation. I'm looking at the fact that my A1C in September of that same year ended up being 10.5. I'm on insulin, 2 diabetes meds, and my A1C is still 10.5, right? And so I'm sitting here going, what is this future going to look like for me? Is it going to look like my little brother with blindness and amputations and how am I going to, play with my grandkids, and how am I going to help my children? Am I going to see them graduate high school? Am I going to see them graduate college if they choose to go that path, right? And so all these things are going through my mind, and I was actually just feeling somewhat, down, depressed. And my wife and I, it just so happened that my father-in-law and mother-in-law saw that Forks Over Knives being advertised. They ended up buying a few copies. They gave us one because they knew I was struggling with health, and sat on the shelf for a few months, quite honestly. And then ultimately one day when I was just really bummed out, down, depressed, we ended up popping the DVD in, and I saw these people who were dramatically improving their health by changing their lifestyle to a whole food, low-fat, plant-based lifestyle. And I said, you know what? That's the one thing I haven't tried. I tried to count carbs, count calories, portion control, exercise more, eat less, all those different tactics we hear about, right? And sustainable long-term for me, it just didn't happen. It wasn't doable for me. But this was the one thing I hadn't tried. And so I told Kim and I looked at each other, I'm like, let's try this. We haven't tried this avenue. And lo and behold, in a matter of days, Dr. Sabatino, I see my glucose levels start plummeting. 3 days, 4 days, my glucose levels are coming down. I start losing between 5 to 7 pounds a week. My energy levels are starting to really come up. And I'm thinking, hey, there's something to this, because I don't remember feeling this way when I tried these other diet changes. And so lo and behold, in a matter of 2 months working with my doctor, I was able to get off all 5 of my medications, because I was taking high blood pressure and high cholesterol meds as well, 5 total medications, including insulin. I was off all those in a matter of 2 months. And in 3 months, I had gone from 260 pounds down to 210. Now, the last time I weighed 210 pounds, I was in 5th grade. I was 10 years old. So for me, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. And life is just amazing. And, it just so happens now that, of course, my daughter's 30, my son is 27. We have 2 beautiful grandchildren, and I can see them very clearly. I see every light on their face, and I can see their colors. And there is no money. There is no amounts of money you can put on the amazing joy that we get in playing with our grandkids and being able to experience the joys of enjoying our family and not shackled with all kinds of medicine and insulin, etc. That is chronic illness. And and my wife and I have worked with, helped a lot of people over this last decade that we've been helping through Chickpea and Bean.
Well, let's talk about that, because I want to, first of all, you use the word sustainable, and I love that word: sustainable weight loss, sustainable health. So these many years later, where does your weight stand now? Where are you now?
It's funny you say that, because I weighed myself this morning. I was 204. So
you've kept it down, you've kept it off, and you're at your best fighting weight, really, truthfully. So let's talk about the evolution of Chickpea and Bean, because this is such a remarkable thing that you're doing. Because when I went into your site and I see the outreach things that you're doing. So let's talk about how you went from, these wonderful changes that were inspired by Forks Over Knives, and then you and your wife working together, to actually creating the nonprofit that you created, which is really affecting people's lives in such a positive way. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we were ecstatic about the results I had received by eliminating the meds and reducing a ton of weight, feeling better, right? And now we were a little angry at the same time, because not one medical professional in our entire time, over a decade of battling with chronic disease, no one ever said, hey, why don't you try eating a plant-based lifestyle? Not once was it mentioned, right? And so we were a little upset, like, excuse the French, but pissed off. Like, why didn't anyone even give us the opportunity? Maybe we don't do it, but at least give us an option, right? Give us that.
Right.
And so Kim and I, we saw Forks Over Knives. A few days later, through Forks Over Knives, we found out about Dr. Neil Barnard. We bought his book about Dr. Neil Barnard's program for reversing diabetes. Read his book. And after that book, we implemented following his strategies, implemented a low-fat plant-based lifestyle, like I said, in months. And then we said, you know what? PCRM, or Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, also has a program, a Food for Life instructor program, where you can learn and more about this lifestyle, learn how to teach it to and show others how to live this way, etc. So we thought, you know what? We need to share this. We need to scream it from the mountaintops, kind of like it's stated on our website, because so many families, Dr. Sabatino, and I know you know this, so many people are struggling like crazy. Dialysis, all the insulin, all the medications, feeling like crap, obesity, etc. Right? And there's a lot we can do if we just fix the food. Now, of course, exercise is important. A little meditation, a little yoga, if you can get that in there, is great. But we wanted to learn how to do this. So we became Food for Life instructors back in 2014, 2015, around that time. And so now we teach classes on how to help people implement this lifestyle. And we've also, over the last 8 years or so, Dr. Sabatino, one of the things we realized is, look, the medical professionals are not getting that information to their patients. Maybe if we taught medical students about this lifestyle, maybe, even if they don't adopt it, at least they're aware, they know, because we know, in talking to so many of the medical schools over all these eight last years, they're not getting nutrition information in the medical schools. They're learning about acute injury, how to fix a broken bone or broken leg, and they're also learning about the 20 diabetes meds that you can use on your patients, but they're not focusing on trying to get to the root cause. Why is this person diabetic, right? So we thought, let's try and get into the medical schools. And for 8 years now, we've been able to do what Kim and I call our plant plunge. And we invite any and all medical students, nursing students, anyone in the medical profession, if they're interested in learning about this, come on and join us. We do it, for free to them, and obviously Physicians Committee helps sponsor that. But what's cool is we end up taking a little finger poke. We get a quick lipid panel, some blood glucose, get their blood pressure, get their weight. And in these young mid-20-year-old individuals, we see that their blood glucose levels, for most of them, it's pretty stable. Most of them aren't dealing with high blood glucose levels, but what many of them do see very pleasantly, that cholesterol drop, right? When they stop eating cholesterol, they're like, whoa. They also notice, hey, my energy level, I feel like I got more energy. I'm working out. So we've been doing that now for 8 years at Wayne State University School of Medicine. We've been doing it for 7 at the Oakland University School of Medicine. We've done a couple years with U of M. But
well, that's fantastic. Marc, let people know where they can find out more about what you're doing, your site. Give them the site. So mention what the URL is, please.
Yeah, so it's chickpeaandbean.com. So that's ChickpeaandBean.com. Chickpeaandbean.com. Just like it sounds, that's where you can find us and learn more about the things we're doing. And Dr. Sabatino, I just want to say thank you for all that you are doing to continually get this knowledge and this information out there, because so many people will benefit from it, and really appreciate all that you are doing.
Well, Marc, you touch on such an important piece, because when we look at the genetic direction that somebody can take, and we get lost in that whole genetic story, and it's not that it doesn't play, because there are genetic things that do influence health outcome. But this whole field of epigenetics, where these outside influences, especially the food we're eating, has such a big impact on how those genes express themselves. And there's no better example than your family and you in that family, because, by all rights, the genetic direction would have been you going down the same path as your brothers, your sisters, your mother. And just by making the changes you did, you completely freed yourself from that kind of that genetic prison that people like to look at. So that idea that we can not only prevent something, but we can reverse it, is such a huge message. And your point is well made. It's not taught in medical schools. It's not taught in professional schools that way. That's why most doctors are just disease managers. They're not real healthcare providers. So when you work with these docs, do you bring them in person or is it online? How does it work?
So they're medical students, and we do 4 in-live presentations. We bring in food. Kim and I will give an hour-long presentation. They're eating low-fat, plant-based meals, right? And we're sharing all the knowledge and information we have, testimonials that we've had from other people we've worked with, and we do that for 4 weeks in a row. So we do a pre and a post blood work. They check their weight, they check their blood pressure, and they get a quick lipid panel.
Well, who's doing the blood work? You have doctors that work with you? Is that how it's working?
So actually, the medical students are doing it on themselves.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
We have two glucose meters that really they're glucose and lipid panel meters, and we bring them in, we show them how to use them, and then they perform them on themselves.
Cool. Very cool.
And if I can just leave you with 2 things. Number 1, I'm not special. I'm almost 57 years old. I'm no more special than any one of you listening or watching this program right now. So I promise you, if you really wrap your arms around this idea that food is what's killing us, but it can also be what saves us, you might be amazed at what can happen with your body. And number 2, the other thing I need to tell you, at 57 years old, you're going to get plenty of protein. Stop this whole thing about, you don't get enough protein. Where are you getting your protein? I get that all the time. So
I know. It's such nonsense. It really is such nonsense. You're not telling the complete story. And I want to touch this part of your organization, because I love the fact that not only are you doing that with medical students, but you're bringing this awareness into like the inner cities, the more impoverished places. So you're doing a lot of free programs for like inner city Detroit and rural areas where people don't have access to the information the way they should. And as the government subsidizes a lot of these foods that are only harming us, creating obesity and diabetes and the like, and they make those more available in those kinds of communities. So the fact that you're going in to the trenches a little bit, talk a little bit about how those programs evolved, because I was very intrigued by that.
Yeah, so we've done many programs with the Chaz Clinic here in Detroit, Michigan. It's in in the inner city there, really around there's a big Hispanic population in that general vicinity. There's also all kinds of people, but it's largely Hispanic. And we've done, we do these programs in Spanish too, because I speak Spanish as well. So we've gone in there and we've offered free programs, and they're kickstarts similar to the Plant Plunge. It's just 4 to 6 weeks of weekly meeting, sharing food, sharing knowledge and information, getting some blood work. When we go into Chaz, they're an actual medical clinic, so they will run the blood work, they'll check their weight, etc., blood pressure. And inevitably there too, we see people that if they just wrap their arms around this idea and they really make the changes, they end up seeing the results. And that's what's really cool about this. We know, Kim and I know, that if you really are implementing this lifestyle, low-fat, whole food, plant-based, you're going to see the results. We almost, Dr. Sabatino, we have to remind ourselves to get excited, because we expect this to happen.
Right.
This is going to happen. If you really do this, people get better. Now, I'm not promising you'll be able to get off all your meds and you lose 1 million pounds. But what we do promise people is if you really are doing it, you're going to improve. Your health is going to get better. Some people are going to need medications their whole lives, right? We're very fortunate in this country to have the medical knowledge and technology that we do to help people. But the problem is too many people are relying on that versus really looking to the food and lifestyle to help us be healthier.
Yeah, you know what I also like, and I think it's important, is that when you look at indigenous cultures, in your case, Mexican, in my case, Italian, if you look at these ethnic groups, many of their indigenous diets are very much in line with what we're trying to teach. But yet we've lost track when we come to a melting pot like America and we start incorporating all the junk food and processed food and animal foods. So what I loved about your site too, that I thought was a real turn on, is that you were presenting a lot of the real indigenous kind of Mexican food prep that really embraces a really remarkable plant-based thing. So, the fajitas and all the recipes you had on your site, I thought were fantastic. And I think, we need to kind of take a step back and realize that these cultures were doing some amazing things in a very healthy way. And somehow we kind of extracted them away from that or moved them away from that. And I like the fact that in your site and in your work, you're bringing people back to that with what amounts to being incredibly tasty recipes. So talk about that little bit of turning people on to their own indigenous diets. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting that people will ask me, well, Mark, don't you miss all the food that you enjoyed growing up? And I'm like, no. Why? Because I'm still eating a lot of it. And quite honestly, we try to tell this to people, and as we teach them about this lifestyle, it's like, look, if you take a piece of chicken or steak, it's not the chicken or the steak that's giving that food the real pop. It's the spices and the herbs and the rubs that you're putting on top of that. And so we can do the same thing with mushrooms, with potatoes, with beans. There are so many foods. And so when I eat, I can still have fajitas. They're just veggie fajitas, right? And we don't cover them in oil. We steam them with water. You throw on the seasoning. By the time you put a little bit of salsa, some jalapenos, a little bit of avocado.
Absolutely.
And the same thing holds true, Frank, in the Italian culture, in the Indian culture,
Absolutely.
It's the spices. And so let's eat these foods. Let's set aside the animal products. Let's see what food items we can throw in, right? We love pasta primavera, right? We still eat pasta.
Right.
My wife will make some different, so she'll use a little bit of tofu to be a cheese-like substance, if you will, but she makes some amazing baked ziti. I mean, all these amazing food. Pizza. You can have a thing about pizza with.
Yeah, I saw your pizza recipe. I thought it was cool. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, any culture, just how can we substitute get those animal products out of our lives? Not only are they helping our health, but as I'm sure you're aware, the planet and all the craziness, tearing down the rainforest and all this to create more lots for animals. We don't need to do that.
And I want to emphasize to our audience that you have a lot of these incredible recipes on chickpeaandbean.com on that site. So I'm urging our audience to really visit that site because it's remarkable, some of the things that you have there. And they were all things that I said, yeah, I want to try this. I like your birthday fajitas. That was really kind of very cool. You know what I'm saying?
Good stuff. Yeah, it is great.
So Mark, where do you see yourself going with all this? Where does it go for you? What do you want to do? Or you want to kind of keep doing more of what you're doing, or do you have some other bigger vision of how you want to integrate some of this?
So I've been working for a company for over 25 years. It's one of the largest telecommunication companies in the world. And, at some point I'll be 57 here shortly. But my goal, Frank, is, God willing, if everything goes well, once I decide to retire from this company, my plan is to continue teaching and maybe do a little more on the helping people understand how to help their health. That's really, there is nothing greater than having someone look you in the eye and tell you, thank you for saving my life, for turning my life around. And we have individuals that have just seen dramatic improvement. And for many, it's not just them, Frank, but it could be the spouse as well as the children. Right. So you're trying to share this power and knowledge with these individuals that can hopefully help their brothers and sisters and families do better as well. So God willing, we're going to be in my 80s. You look at Dr. Campbell and Dr. Esselstyn, and these guys are in their 80s and approaching 90. And I want to be that guy that can help people. Now, it might not be every day. Maybe it's a couple of days a week, but I don't see my wife and I stopping this work really in the near future at all. In fact,
yeah, I hope not. I hope you keep going and pushing it, baby, for sure. So as we wind this down, Mark, do you have any final words you'd like to share with the audience out here? Any kind of inspirational message or words that you want to share?
Yeah, I would just say that find that motivation for you. What's your why? When you're looking at, hey, I need to change my life. I've tried all these lifestyles. Nothing seems to be working. Get that motivation for you. And for me, it was looking at my family, my wife, my kids, and my grandkids, who we didn't have them at the time that we started this journey, right? But what does that future look like? And let that be your motivation, right? Mm-hmm. Are we perfect? Nobody is, right? I've not had any animal products in since 2011, December 2011. However, there's a bunch of, vegan junk food out there. You can go and get cakes and all that. So if you need to, a little treat once in a blue moon, okay. Because I will tell you, on my birthday, I might have a piece of vegan chocolate cake, right? But the key is to you can do this. I promise you. If I can do it, this meat eating, football, macho, protein guy can do it. I promise you can too. And just find your motivation, find your why, and let that be your guide to help you keep moving in this direction. And it doesn't matter. If it takes a week, a month, a year, just keep working to it, right? Some people can make that switch from one day to the next. Others, it takes a little longer. Just keep working on trying to improve yourself. But main thing is, I know you can do it.
And I can't thank my guest, Marc Ramirez, enough for being with us today, really sharing his heart, his inspiration, and the beautiful work they're doing with Chickpea and Bean. I urge you to go to their site. You see it scrolling across the screen. There's some fantastic recipes. There's some fantastic information. And I want to thank everybody that joined us today, because without you, we can't do what we do. And I want to really thank you for being part of this really active, healthy community. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I truly look forward to being with you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it.
It was an honor. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.